Hello, everyone, and welcome to our latest Zoey Merchant webinar. This is Josh from Zoey's Partnerships team, and we're really happy to have you here today. This webinar, like last week's, is focusing on some interesting information that can help you as a merchant start to get ready for the holidays. It's that time of year already. We're already in August, and the holiday season will be here before you know it. So we wanted to present some information that's a little less obvious than some of the things you might read online or research about what you should be thinking about when preparing your store for the holiday season. Before we get into the presentation, which includes Rob Long from PayPal, we just want to remind you, especially those of you who have never been on the webinar before, about our questions feature within GoToWebinar. That's how you can submit your questions for the Q&A at the end. We'll go through the presentation and then take your questions, so feel free to submit throughout the presentation, and we'll answer all of them at the conclusion. If we run out of time, we will send an email out with a follow-up, but the last round of webinars, we've been able to successfully answer all questions within our time frame. So definitely submit any and all questions that you have, no matter how big or small. We'd love to talk about it. And we want to remind you that we are continually scheduling webinars for you and have actually completed more than a dozen so far this year. So if you are new to this series and want to see some of the other presentations that we've introduced, visit zoe.com/merchant-webinars. You'll be able to see recordings and the slide decks from every one of the presentations we've done so far. And we're also starting to put those recordings on YouTube, so you can also find it on our Zoey Commerce channel. And we will also announce upcoming webinars there. We don't have any yet for September, October, but we will be announcing some soon. So stay tuned, and we'll have new presentations ready for you to register very shortly. Without further ado, let's introduce Rob at PayPal. He's going to talk to you about some things that you should be thinking about in your checkout process as you start to optimize for the holiday season. Rob, feel free to take it away.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thanks, Josh. I'm going to go ahead and show my screen. Just give me a shout once you're able to see it.
Looks good.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, hey, yeah, thanks again, Josh. Couldn't be happier to be here today. Appreciate the invitation. We get the opportunity today to talk about some really interesting data that's coming out of PayPal, in particular, hopefully actionable data that folks on the Zoey platform and folks on the call can use before the holidays to optimize some of the great things that they want to optimize. But by way of introduction, again, Rob Long from PayPal. I'm part of the professional services organization, which helps retailers and platforms better understand payments, better understand the PayPal technology, and integrate the technology into their platforms and stores. Prior to PayPal, I was a system integrator for close to a decade, helping e-commerce players, merchants, and platforms to make and keep more customers online. And before that, actually, with a couple of partners, created and built a couple of e-commerce stores. So this time period, this period that you mentioned, Josh, is that time period I remember. I hearken back to my early days when we're having conversations with customers, having conversations with partners, and having conversations with our folks that we relied on for best practices, and said, okay, what can we do this time of year to begin either testing, implementing, or what are some of those things that we've got to have in order to have a fantastic holiday season? So today I'm going to share some of the data coming from PayPal that we think is good, actionable stuff that you should be implementing today. We'll talk about some things to perhaps begin testing now before the holiday season, and some things to think about as you're heading into the rest of the year. Perhaps if you have some downtime to start thinking about into next year, some new interesting things. So as you see there on the screen, it's the agenda is very straightforward. We're going to talk about some of the latest data coming from PayPal. We'll talk about optimizing, closing the conversion gap, optimizing for the holidays, and finally we'll talk about getting a higher or higher percentage of the wallet by leveraging, or at least looking at leveraging, some new payment options. So to kind of set the stage a little bit, where's this data coming from? It's coming from PayPal, and PayPal is no longer a small little wallet company. PayPal is a large global organization. As you see in the screen here, we're in over 200 markets. We have 200 million plus active users. We work in 56 different currencies. and very much important for this discussion, we have 16 million merchants, and last year did over 6 billion transactions, the scale of which still boggles my mind. But from those 6 billion transactions, we learned a heck of a lot. We'll talk a little bit about that today. One of the key areas where we've been learning a lot, and we think that we have a good story to tell and some interesting information for the folks on the call, is 102 billion of those transaction dollars were via mobile. Really interesting data coming out of that that I'm going to share, and some ways to perhaps optimize against some of that data. And then finally, the last figure there is 53 million folks have enabled or opted in for our one-touch experience at Express Checkout. We'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like and how that can be a net benefit for folks on the call. So again, where's the data coming from? It's coming from a few different business units within PayPal. PayPal family is large and growing, but a couple key areas where we see interesting data that we'll share today. One of those is from Venmo. So Venmo is the mobile P2P or person-to-person payments app that's hugely popular and growing at triple digits year over year. It's fantastically useful and a great little app, and actually a lot of fun. Me and many of the folks that I share dollars with have a lot of fun with the app, but we learn a lot from the massive volume of dollars that are going through the Venmo app. We'll talk a little bit about that. The very, very interesting data coming out of our PayPal credit unit. We'll talk about what PayPal credit is, how you can leverage it, in particular towards the holiday season, and some really interesting data there. And finally, from our Braintree unit, the direct credit card processing company, Braintree, that's been a part of the PayPal family for a while. So again, 6 billion transactions from multiple different business units that we're going to be talking about, and we'll dive down deep into. So let's talk about the actionable stuff. What are those things that you can put into place today or in this short time period before we hit the holiday season? We want to talk about closing the mobile conversion gap. Folks that I work with often call this slide the Captain Obvious slide, but it starts out with mobile is hot. Yes, we know mobile is very hot. It's Captain Obvious. But what not a lot of folks know is that we see, and the folks from Smart Insights have seen a tremendous, a massive, a huge gap in conversion rates between those folks that are shopping on desktop and those folks that are shopping on a mobile experience or a mobile phone or a smartphone. 66% drop in conversion rate. So the average conversion rate in a desktop experience is 3.55%. In the mobile experience, it's 1.15%. Abysmal conversion rate across a pretty significant amount of data from Smart Insights. So it presents a huge opportunity. As you see on the right here, for a hypothetical or a 1 million example of $1 million in revenue, if 25% of your visitors, which for some folks is fairly small, if 25% of your visitors are coming via smartphone, via mobile, you have the potential, by increasing your conversion rate for those existing customers that are already coming to your website, you have a tremendous opportunity to close the gap. As we see here, we're doing a little bit of math, roughly on $1 million in annual revenues, 500,000 potential gain from optimizing for the mobile experience. But when we talk about mobile conversion, it makes sense that a mobile conversion rate is significantly lower. Why? It's a behavioral change. Those folks that are in mobile phone are trying to solve a problem. They may remember the milk. They may be waiting in line. They may be got a text and they need to solve a problem immediately. Mobile users are buyers, not shoppers. And what you see here from the data that we see in from Smart Insights, desktop shoppers have many items in their cart, but those folks that are shopping from mobile phone typically have one item that is in their cart. And so obviously it's a behavioral change. They're trying to solve a problem. They're in a contextual shift where they have just a limited amount of time and they need to solve the problem via the mobile phone. Significant amount of items in a desktop shopping cart, significantly fewer, down to one, in a mobile experience. So what does that mean? So if you want to optimize for a mobile user, they have a problem that they're trying to solve. What are the best things that we can do? Well, it's very straightforward. We want to remove as much friction in the checkout process as possible. So we have a complete best practices look at how to optimize the payments component of the checkout process. But Zoey platform does an exceedingly good job out of the box. But if you haven't optimized for a mobile experience, if you haven't optimized for mobile users in general, here are a couple key things that you can do immediately. So a billing address first. In most of the default guest checkout for mobile, you see a billing address form first. What we see is 85 to 95% plus of checkout experiences, the billing address and shipping address are the same. Best practice from our folks or from our internal users and some of the work that we've done, leverage the shipping form first, and if possible, fill completely or autofill the billing address. If you're not able to do that, or if you're, one other option is to have the shipping address first, shipping address form first, and then a zip code fill for the billing address component of your checkout process. Dramatically reduces the amount of thumb use for a mobile user, and in some cases, we've seen a fairly dramatic increase in conversions by reducing the amount of form filling necessary to dump the billing address if possible. The other key component which you see which drives a little bit of friction in the actual payment form is the credit card type. No good reason today, because we can infer the credit card type from the credit card number. No good reason today to have a toggle for a credit card. We can infer it, a couple lines of JavaScript, a quick integration, and that's gone. Likewise with the expiration date, best practice is to match the expiration date and type, or date, month, and year in order to reduce the amount of toggle or reduce the amount of thumb use for mobile users. So summary for reducing friction, in particular for mobile shoppers, from the data that we're seeing, there's potentially 66% increase available for your mobile checkout experience. A few things that we think you should do immediately before the holiday season. Use, for collecting addresses, use postal code to, very similar to inferring the credit card type from the credit card number. Use your postal code to pre-fill city, state, and country. Start again with the shipping address, and if possible, only collect the postal code for the billing address. And again, as we mentioned, remove the credit card type from the credit card entry, and match the month and year for the expiration. Dramatically reduces the number of clicks and makes the entire process much simpler, faster, cleaner for your guest checkout experience. And then finally, the overall strategy to put in place beyond a couple of these quick hacks is to minimize the number of clicks from your product page to purchase. It makes a lot of sense. And when you have those mobile folks in particular who are trying to solve a problem, the fewer clicks possible increases the likelihood of a conversion. And finally, for your mobile users, you will want to test, or may want to try testing, removing the cross-sell, upsell from your mobile experience. This is something that we recommend testing. We've seen some uplift for some of the merchants, but haven't seen it across the board. So it's definitely something to test rather than going for a wholesale integration live.
Hey, Rob.
Yes, sir.
Really quickly before we move on from that, one thing I just want to tie back to a previous merchant webinar around the addresses one in particular. For those of you who didn't get a chance to check it, we had a presentation earlier this year from a company called Addressy. They offer address lookup and search in the process of the checkout. So instead of typing in the entire address, once you fill in a certain amount of it based on GeoIP lookups and so forth, they can help fill in the rest of it. So the customer on a mobile device in particular doesn't have to type the whole address. And then that obviously saves a lot of trouble overall. So that's another tool that's available on Zoey, and they have a freemium model, which means that many merchants can use it without paying. So it's another good thing to check out if they're trying to reduce the amounts of friction during the billing and shipping addresses, which is definitely by far the largest part of a checkout in terms of the number of boxes to fill in.
Absolutely, Josh. Awesome call out. Thanks for that. It's whatever you can do to reduce the amount of friction. I mean, the key takeaway from this component is whatever you can do to take away as much friction as possible, leverage it, test it, and see what the improvements are. In some cases, when we've pushed out best practices to merchants, we've seen a dramatic increase, but definitely test as many of these items as possible in order to get to the best, whatever that number is, whatever the goal conversion rate is, test that as much as possible. So absolutely. One call out here, I'd be loath to not call out that as a part of these best practices for easy, quick checkout, PayPal and PayPal Express Checkout have integrated many of these best practices into the standard one-touch PayPal Express Checkout in context checkout model. And so you can see here that from a mobile experience, we've learned a lot and we've implemented a lot from the PayPal Express Checkout. With One Touch, as I mentioned, 50+ million folks have opted in for the One Touch experience. Within that One Touch experience, a PayPal a customer with One Touch simply has to click the yellow button. They're automatically logged in with the shipping information already filled out, with the payment information ready to go. They click continue, and you get an order in your inbox. It's an easy, quick process, and we've seen a tremendous amount of benefit for retailers who have implemented the Express Checkout with One Touch experience. And from the Zoey platform, very simple, to toggle the PayPal Express Checkout on within the payments backend. And just as a data point, with PayPal One Touch, 40% of online buyers said they'd be more likely to shop with a particular online retailer if one-click checkout were an option. And we see this particularly for mobile users because the friction is nearly removed from the process. So moving forward, so once the friction is taken out of the process, once you've optimized your checkout process, once you've optimized your payment forms and the overall checkout process, we believe the next key thing that you should look at is optimizing your payment options. And what do I mean by that? Well, we have a way of thinking here that there's 3 or 4 gotta have. There's some to consider, there's some to test, and so definitely some special cases. And so as we're moving to the holiday season, from a PayPal perspective, we're seeing really, really interesting data around PayPal credit. We'll dive into that a little bit. And then from our Braintree unit, with the Braintree direct credit card processing, which we'll dive into a little bit, time permitting, we have the ability to surface Apple Pay, Android Pay, Visa Checkout, MasterPass, Bitcoin, Venmo, plus through the Braintree integration, there are many, many, many payment options available, all of which to test. But what I'd like to talk a little bit about for must-haves as you're driving into the holiday season, I'd love to talk a little bit about credit for the holidays. And so what do I mean by that? So PayPal Credit has been available for a long time. You may know it as Bill Me Later. And actually in the Zoey platform today, when you click the toggle on for PayPal Credit, it's formerly known as Bill Me Later. So PayPal Credit is formerly known as Bill Me Later, but the opportunity that it presents for the folks on this call and for merchants and retailers in the U.S. or U.S. customers is a great opportunity to increase the amount and share of the wallet for your customers. PayPal Credit is an easy way for you as a retailer to offer financing for your customers. In particular, if you have a high average order volume or the amount of orders is high, $80 plus, there's a distinct opportunity and you may be leaving dollars on the table by not offering some sort of financing mechanism like PayPal Credit. So as you see here on the screen, we have really, really interesting data that's coming from PayPal Credit, some of which is that 25% of the PayPal Credit users say they wouldn't have made a purchase if they didn't have PayPal Credit available. Interesting fact, but probably more interesting for the folks on this call is 40% of PayPal Credit users spent more online, and some small and mid-sized merchants that we work with saw up to a 68% increase in transaction size for customers using PayPal Credit versus other options. So it's a very easy process to implement. We'll talk a little bit about what that looks like, but the key takeaways are you have an opportunity for significant dollars that may be left on the table today, but the integration process is fine, and you get paid up front as a merchant, and we as PayPal take on the risk. So what does PayPal Credit really look like? From a consumer side, it's part of their PayPal wallet if they're a PayPal existing customer. The process for applying for PayPal Credit is 4 or 5 easy pieces of information. It's an instantaneous result. Once they're approved for PayPal Credit, they can use those dollars immediately, and it becomes another option within the PayPal wallet, like the credit cards that they have linked into their PayPal wallet, the stored dollars that they have existing in their PayPal wallet. It becomes another option as they're going towards checkout. For existing customers that already have PayPal Credit, there's no need to reapply. They simply pay with PayPal Credit at the checkout. And for retailers, there's a couple different options to promote PayPal Credit, because that's really the key notion here, is that PayPal Credit is available for PayPal users. It's a simple, easy process for applying. But the key notion for retailers is if your customer doesn't know it's available, doesn't know that they have an option for significantly more dollars in their PayPal wallet, there's an opportunity for you as a merchant to add banners to your website promoting PayPal Credit. And within the Zoey platform, when you toggle yes or on for PayPal Credit, a second button appears in your checkout process. If you've done significant modifications, that may not be an immediate case, but it presents a second button in the Zoey platform for PayPal Credit to be one of the options that your users see at the outside. As I say, Josh is going to share this PowerPoint deck at the end of this, but the process for turning on PayPal Credit is very, very, very simple. And by logging into your backend within Zoey, you have it immediately available as part of the core experience within Zoey. And so in the interest of time here, I know we wanted to have a significant amount of time for questions. Josh, I'm going to talk a little bit about alternative payments. As we mentioned, via the Braintree experience. So Braintree is our direct credit card processing facility company within PayPal. Via Braintree, we have the ability to surface a multitude of different payments. And as we said at the outside of the webinar, this is the time of year to start thinking about things you've got to do, got to have in place, things that are going to move the needle. We think Express Checkout, optimizing for mobile with Express Checkout, One Touch, and PayPal Credit are things that really are important to test this time of year. And there's some things that we're seeing some traction that may not fit into perhaps the month or two leading up to the holiday season, but definitely something to have on your overall roadmap to test. And again, by the Braintree extension, Braintree integration, SDK integration, it's simple to surface a multitude of payment options. Those include Apple Pay, Android Pay, and later you'll see some pretty interesting things around Venmo. We're in testing right now with retailers. Again, that platform is growing at a tremendous amount. It'll be interesting to see what folks do with adding Venmo as a payment mechanism on their e-commerce website. And so I'll highlight here the difference between PayPal and Braintree. Braintree is our direct credit card processing company, enables you to surface things like Apple Pay, Android Pay, and those, versus the PayPal experience, which is the traditional PayPal Express Checkout, PayPal wallet experience. Two separate companies that are fully integrated. And today, when you're working with PayPal, you're working with Braintree. When you're working with Braintree, you're working with PayPal. And so finally here for Braintree's credit card processing solution is very easy to integrate. In order to leverage Android Pay and Apple Pay and any of these advanced payment features, it does mean transitioning from your existing credit card processor over to Braintree. So again, this time of year, that's something to think about and/or to think about into the next year. But you do have to do a transition to direct credit card processing with some of the interesting distinct benefits to folks that we've listed here for later as you get the deck. And so what I'd love to do is just By way of summary, to give you a sense on some of the key learnings from this webinar and some of the key things that we think you should definitely test as soon as possible, and some of those things that may be worth looking at later. So as we said, reduce the amount of friction in the checkout process, as we say here, the address collection, the credit card entry, and understand from a behavioral standpoint that mobile shoppers are mobile buyers. They're not shoppers, and they typically have just a small number of items in their shopping cart, and they want to get to the checkout process as quickly as possible. On the right-hand side, we think from optimizing payments or optimizing the options for payment, PayPal Express Checkout is a great option, as well as PayPal Credit. Testing out the promotion of PayPal Credit and see if it benefits you and results in an uplift now and during the holiday season. And then finally, some of the alternative payment systems or next level payment systems are something definitely to test via our Braintree integration, but definitely something to look at as you're looking at some of the alternative options as you're looking to get a larger share of your customer's wallet. So Josh, I'd love to take some questions. If you've got some questions, we can dive deep into any of these sections. But it's been an absolute pleasure sharing some of this content, and look forward to in future sessions, including as much additional content as we possibly can.
Well, first off, thank you, Rob, for that. There's a lot of great information. And before I get into a few points before we do the questions, I did want to remind people how to submit a question. So use the questions feature to submit your questions for Q&A here in the GoToWebinar software, and we'll review the questions momentarily to discuss some of these topics. But there are a couple things I did want to bring up that are kind of related to what we just talked about. So the first thing is we do not at this point have Apple Pay, unfortunately, for Braintree. So we are in the process of working with the developer who was able to bring it to other platforms such as Magento to also bring it to Zoey, and we actually believe that that's going to happen relatively soon, but we just want to be clear for the customers listening today that it's not available yet. So we are definitely hearing the inquiries about it, though, and are working diligently to get that available at some point soon. So I just wanted to mention that because that's a big deal.
Yeah, absolutely, Josh. Thanks for that call out, because that is an important one, and happy to lean in there and yeah, absolutely, it's an important call out.
And then the second thing is that one of the things that we didn't hit on in the presentation, but I think it's important to talk to merchants about, and actually I'm going to go in two directions with this. The first is, if all you have right now is a credit card box and you're a small or mid-sized merchant with a name that's not readily recognizable, I do believe that PayPal Express and PayPal Credit and some of these other features is something that every merchant who doesn't have it should be thinking about from a reputation perspective, because if they don't know who you are and they're a little hesitant to put a credit card into a website that they're very new to, having something like a PayPal option where that's entered off-site can make people feel a little safer for that first transaction and get them more comfortable with shopping with you. So it can actually help you also not only capture more conversions from the benefits of those services, but also just by the nature of people being a little skittish sometimes with a credit card number. So I think that's something that every merchant, if you don't have that available today, you should think about, because it's such an easy step to activate and get yourself a business account with PayPal and start collecting money through that realm as well. And you're not going to really notice a major difference in your cost in doing it through PayPal versus your credit card provider. So I really do think that everybody should look at that. And then obviously you can take it a step further if you have Braintree as your credit card processor, because you get the benefit of what they call in-context PayPal checkout, which means they don't leave the site, but they still get the benefit of using PayPal to check out on the site. So it makes sort of a smoother checkout process, which is less disruptive and may lead to more conversions for you as well. So if you have any questions about any of that, because I know that's kind of a lot of concepts there, feel free to email me, josh@zoey.com, and obviously Rob and the PayPal team are also available with questions, but we want to help you understand what that looks like and how you can benefit from it. And so that's something I just wanted to hit on before we got into the questions, because I think that's an important element of this that people should be thinking about, so that they can maximize their sales.
Absolutely, and I appreciate that, Josh. It's all very, very good context around both of those, and excellent call outs, and we from PayPal appreciate the vote of confidence.
For sure. So we have a couple of questions that's come in here. So one of them is relating to if the payment process is sped up, does it have any effect on what the card processing charges are? I think that's a common question. Is sort of a there's obviously that percentage fee plus the per transaction fee that usually exists,
Sure.
and
Yeah,
does that
it's
do
two
anything to
point
that?
nine. Yeah, 2.9 plus 30 cents.
Right. So it doesn't change the fee
Yeah.
by making the
Nope.
transaction faster, but what it does is gets you more sales, so your profits should
Yep.
rise from the more sales. Um,
Exactly. Yes.
and actually, here's a question for you. So we do have merchants who may have made a decision years ago with their credit card processor, and just kind of is right. Like you set it up, and it's one of those things that many merchants just don't really think about very often. But is it worth them checking in on their processor every once in a while if their processing amount has grown? Like, do the fees change if you're doing a lot of volume, like where maybe 3 years ago you weren't? Like, is that something that they should periodically check in with the provider about?
Yes, the answer for that is always yes. Having been in the place of having lots of different vendors, having that vendor check in every so often to see if there's better pricing available is absolutely the case. From our side, that's something that we can discuss with retailers. But the question, the answer to that is absolutely. Always check in with your processor and attempt to get the best rate possible.
Right, so that was the other thing I wanted to mention here is that if I know a lot of our merchants kind of default to authorize.net and set that up because that's sort of the
Yeah.
standard when you get going. That doesn't mean that you should stick with that forever. You should always kick the tires every so often because
Yep.
if you can optimize your rate, even 0.1%, if you do the math, you're doing thousands of dollars in volume. That does become extra money that ultimately comes back to your business, and that it may sound like a very small percentage when you're not doing that many transactions, but as you grow, that it amplifies very quickly. So that does include like if you're on off that maybe giving Braintree a call and seeing if they have a better offer for you, and then you can leverage all of the extra things that Rob's been talking about. So
Yep.
one of the things I like about Braintree too on the Zoey platform is that if you want to have some fraud prevention capabilities, they do have count built in for certain customers. You have to meet certain requirements for it, so it's not going to be available for everyone, but it's a very well known and very well built fraud prevention technology, which could actually help you approve some transactions that if you have your settings turned way high on other platforms, you might not otherwise be able to accept.
Absolutely.
Um, and then one other question relating to all of this: if you're doing something like PayPal credit, is there any additional requirements on the business to offer credit, or is it just something that becomes available as part of working with PayPal? That's something I hear a lot.
It, yeah, it is a part of the process of working with PayPal. You can start promoting it today with banners. The actual the authorization process or the application process is done by the individual through their PayPal account. But the process of promoting it today is available. We have banners at paypalcredit.com that you can include. Besides the second button, obviously, that's available in the Zoey platform by clicking the toggle button on. So absolutely not any additional need beyond starting to promote it.
So the merchant's not on the hook for offering credit, then it's something that PayPal's doing, as you kind of
Correct.
mentioned earlier. All right, yeah, I get that question a
Exactly.
lot because people don't always understand how the
Yeah.
credit part works, and so that's always good to cover.
Yep.
And
Yep.
then
We're trying to make it as easy as possible.
absolutely. So, believe it or not, we don't really have any other questions just yet in the room. I'll give you guys 1 or 2 more minutes in case you do. But let me ask you one other question, Rob, then, since we have a few minutes here. If someone is looking to check into Braintree or PayPal, what is the best process for them to get the conversation started? How would they reach out to you guys?
Yeah, so the first step is both the PayPal.com, BraintreePayments.com, both available today to get that first level of information. We do have a sales staff for both of the organizations that are happy to work with merchants here. Josh, they can reach out to me individually, Rob Long at PayPal.com, and I can help start those conversations. Very easy process, and as you've seen with both the adapters, the integration process post creating an account for both PayPal and Braintree is very straightforward. So again, we're trying to make it as easy as possible. I'm happy to start those conversations with any of the folks that are on the call today.
Excellent. And we did get another question in, and actually it goes back to the fraud protection. Can you speak a little bit to how Braintree
Yep.
works with the fraud protection?
Yeah, so there is native fraud protection that comes built in with Braintree, and as you alluded to, the advanced component of that is the count fraud protection. We have a full data sheet on Braintree payments. We can get pretty granular about fraud pretty quickly, but full data sheets again on BraintreePayments.com regarding the initial out of the box fraud protection. It's pretty slick, and then beyond that. We have the advanced count features that are available via count integrated into the Braintree backend. But as you alluded to, Josh, it's not something for all retailers. But the initial level is built and baked into the Braintree payments functionality.
Absolutely. So in terms of the customer who asked a question, what I'll do is I'll work with Rob to get a link to that data sheet, and I'll send it over to you directly. And if anybody else would like that, I'll be happy to also send that out there, so that way we can get that information out there. But yeah, it's there's different levels to fraud prevention. There's obviously the basic things. Some of you may be familiar with them, like matching all of the numbers on the card. So like if the zip code matches the card and the CVV matches the card, then it'll pass through. Some things are a bit more specific or advanced, and then with things like count, it kind of takes it to another level where they're able to analyze traffic through across a lot of other analytic points, and then sort of let through certain things if they have familiarity with the customer and so forth. So it's all sorts of different levels, and we could spend an hour talking about some of the things that Braintree has in terms of protection, because like there's something called hosted fields, which means when they're typing in their credit card number on Zoey, they're not actually typing it in on Zoey. They're typing it in a little box that's actually hosted by Braintree. So you're not even putting credit card information into the Zoey store, which takes that risk out of the equation. So these are the types of things when you're looking at your credit card processor and making decisions, that if these are concerns for you, it's great to just do a little bit of homework and make a decision based on that information, so you feel comfortable with who you're working with. It's not always just the best rate, but it's also what they provide you on top of that. So I do encourage our customers to spend a little time thinking about these things. You don't have to spend a lot of time all the time, but periodically check in, think about where you are and what you want to accomplish. And there could be definitely some helpful things out there if you haven't done that research in a while. And I think that's it. So, Rob, thank you so much for your time and for the presentation today. For any of you who are watching the recording of this and have any questions that come up while you're watching it, you can always send them in to us. Josh@zoey.com is the best place to send it. I'd also encourage you to let me know what you think of this presentation. If there's any other topics that you want to learn more about, that's our way of making sure that we can schedule some great follow-up sessions around topics that are of interest to you. And don't forget to visit zoey.com/merchant-webinars. Within 24 hours or so, we'll have this recording up and available if you want to review it. There's also recordings of all of our previous webinars. We'll have the slides from this and all of our other presentations there. So just a lot of great information. It's growing by the month, which is great because it just gives you a larger library of support information. And we're also, as I mentioned, starting to roll them out on YouTube, so you can find them there too. You can search YouTube or just find our Zoey Commerce channel. With that, thank you all for your attendance and joining us today. Best of luck as you prepare for your holidays. Keep an eye on our blog. We'll have some holiday tips coming up here in the next couple of weeks that will supplement this information. And until then, thank you again. We'll see you soon in the next webinar, and have a great day.
Thanks, Josh.